Let's bring in our Powerhouse Roundtable, former New Jersey governor and ABC News contributor Chris Christie, Democratic strategist and former DNC chair Donna Brazile, National Review editor Rich Lowry, and Elizabeth Bumiller, the Washington bureau chief for the New York Times. Governor Christie, stock market tumbling, shut down, the mess over Mattis and Syria. This has been a rough week for the president.
Yeah, listen, there are good weeks and bad weeks when you're an executive in government, and this wasn't one of the best weeks that he's had. But in the end, I don't think anybody should be surprised about what's going on here. There's certain things, and I've said this on this program a number of times before, that the president has been pretty consistent on. The two that he's been most consistent on is trade and on the border. And so I can't say I'm surprised by it. I think that the execution of the strategy could have been significantly better, but I'm not surprised where we've ended up, which is he feels like he has to make a stand on this politically because, as you said earlier in the program, it was a central promise in the 2016 campaign.
Well, that was Mexico paying for it.
Well, by the way, and the wall, but wait a second, and the wall too, because, listen, I was in those debates, and there were a number of us who were debating the other side of that and saying that a wall wasn't the best way to do this. So the centrality of the promise is not just the Mexico payment, although that is part of it. It is the wall itself.
It's the wall itself. But Don, explain to me why Democrats are not willing to give anything on this. Couldn't they could get all, I mean, come on, think about what you can get out of Trump.
Wow, that's quite a groan you gave there.
What was that sound?
Wow.
That is the sound of Nancy Pelosi about to take power and feel going to wield it. No, I'm groaning because Democrats have offered this president a little bit to get a lot more, and he rejected it. He rejected it because he thought he could get even more from a Republican-controlled Congress. He didn't get it. And my good friend is Christmas, so you know me and you're going to show a little love right here. But let me just say this. The president, he's unraveled. Things are unraveling. This is more than the wall. And by the way, he promised a beautiful wall. Now we're talking about steel slats. I
think steel slats are beautiful. But let me just, but Donna, listen, if I don't have enough fingers and toes to count the number of times that I've sat on this set or the one in New York and heard Democrats say it's unraveling over the last 2 years. It's unraveling. This is it. This is the fulcrum. This is the point when it's all going to fall apart.
Listen, it's chaotic.
Let me tell you something. It feels a little differently this time.
It's chaotic.
No, listen, it doesn't feel differently to me. This is who this president is. So why are we surprised that he's upending everything? That's who he is. That's who people voted for. So I don't feel it being any different today than I felt before.
I don't think they voted for this.
Let me ask you, the president actually surprised me this week with a tweet that happens on time to time. But look at this tweet. He said, even President Ronald Reagan tried for 8 years to build a border wall or fence and was unable to do so. That surprised me. So I called up Lou Cannon, the great Reagan biographer, and I said, did you ever hear the President Reagan ever push for a wall? He said no. And then this quote surfaced from Reagan in 1980.
Rather than making them or talking about putting up a fence, why don't we work out some recognition of our mutual problems, make it possible for them to come here legally with a work permit, and then while they're working and earning here, they pay taxes here.
What happened to that Republican Party?
Well, Reagan was open-handed on immigration, I think too open-handed on immigration, and one reason Republicans are so skeptical of any big immigration deal is Reagan had one in 1986 where we were supposed to get enforcement in exchange for an amnesty, and the enforcement never really came. So on the wall now, I'm sympathetic to the need for more structure there, but this strategy on the shutdown is a box canyon. First rule of a shutdown, don't take credit for a shutdown. He blew through that rule in the Oval Office. Therefore, Democrats feel no pressure, and they also know with every day that passes and you get closer to January 3rd, their influence and power is going to increase because Nancy Pelosi is going to take the gavel. So I fear the two likeliest outcomes here for the president are a defeat that he claims is a victory or a defeat that he blames on congressional Republicans.
How does it end?
That's a good question. So January 3rd, Nancy Pelosi opens up the House votes to open the government. Senate goes along. Then what does the president do? Does he veto that bill and say, I'm going to keep the government shut, keep 800,000 workers without pay? Where does he go from there? So I think the only, you see a little bit of a glimmer of it you saw with Mick Mulvaney this morning, maybe after Christmas. There's somebody says they reach a number of $2 billion. The Democrats call it border security, and the Republican, Trump calls it a wall.
But Richard, we've seen it wasn't obviously there was the shutdown. Yet Mike Pence, the vice president, went up and basically told the Republican senators earlier this week that the president was okay with the measure to keep the government open.
Right.
They backed down to that, and then Syria and Mattis.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to hear something a little bit different, which is Republican senator after Republican senator coming out and expressing openly criticism of the White House.
Yeah, so the president has to be careful because, you know, Mattis, there were deeper problems with Mattis. The president thought Mattis was basically ignoring him on everything, not just trying to talk him out of bad decisions on big things. But Mattis represented the marriage of the Republican establishment to this president. And breaking of that bond is not a good thing for the president because he needs the entire spectrum of the party to feel as warmly as possible towards him because he has these very high stakes, very intense political and legal fights coming up in the new year, and he needs every single Republican to have his back on those.
Yeah. So what does the new year look like?
Well,
I mean,
listen,
is this the precursor?
one of the things I've often said to the president is when you're executing on executive power in government, there has to be a strategy that has an end game. And what I'm concerned about is what Rich said. I don't know what the end game is here. And it hasn't been articulated. And in all of this stuff, the other thing that this administration at times has really not appreciated is the cross currents. Everything affects everything else. The president comes from a world where each deal is discrete. It's this piece of real estate. We argue, we sue each other, we fight, and then it's only money, so let's make a compromise and we move on. In this world, everyone remembers every slight. Everyone remembers every time they were told, okay, pass this and I'll sign it, and then you change your mind. And they lie in the weeds and they wait to get you. If you have issues coming up like the Mueller report, like potential investigations from House Democrats, if you have those things, you've got to keep, as Rich very well put, your Republicans completely in line with you to be able to fight off a political or legal attack from the other side.
And Democrats smell blood.
Smell blood. I mean, he's splattered blood all over Washington with, you know, the way he's treating not just General Mattis, but the way he's treating a lot of other top Republicans. Look, leaving Syria without a strategy is an open door for Moscow. Leaving the Kurds without protection is an open door for Iran. So I don't know what the president's strategy is. I mean, you say he's not unraveling, but this is the worst chaos I've seen in a generation.
One thing I think
I would agree with that. I have never seen. You were talking about this presidency as if it's sort of a normal presidency that's gone on.
No, I never said that.
Oh, okay. Because I have been in
water.
Washington a long time. I've never seen anything like this. Nothing. And I think you were talking about leaving Syria. I mean, the interesting thing is that this leaving Syria is something Obama probably would have done, but he would have done it much differently. There would have been a long review.
That's what I was going to say.
clear.
It's very interesting that, you know, these are Obama and Trump supposed to be complete diametrical opposites.
Right.
But Trump is doing the same thing in Syria that Obama did in Iraq. And I think the reason is Obama wouldn't have been president, Trump wouldn't have been president if both of them hadn't vociferously opposed the Iraq war. So they had kind of similar DNA in that respect.
And
So
let me
how
be
do you
clear.
explain Afghanistan?
Well-
and giving the Taliban, you know, some.
Look,
So
I think they're
that's-
both horrible decisions. All right.
And let me be clear on, since Elizabeth brought up this point, I didn't say this is a normal presidency. I said this is what people voted for. Now, no, wait a second. The president
They
is
voted for the
acting
stock market?
Wait a second. The president. Well, listen. The stock market, you vote for it when it's up, and nobody wanted to give him credit when it's up, and he took credit, and now everybody wants to give him blame when it's down. That's not fair. What they voted for was Washington to be upended. They hate Washington, D.C.
That certainly happened.
Right?
It happened.
But John, that's my point. You know, this hysteria about, oh, I've never seen chaos like this. This is what the American people voted for. They said that the way Washington was being run by both parties
They wanted
was
a
not
disruptor.
effective, and they wanted a disruptor, and now they've got a disruptor. Now, you know, people may decide they don't like this much disruption, but don't tell me this is not what people expected. People who voted for him, and if you talk to people who are supporters of him, they like this. They like not every bit of it. They don't agree with every policy
You're not going
decision.
to tell me those workers in Michigan and Pennsylvania who are about to lose their job from GM, they're liking this. No, they don't like this. They don't like this form of disruption.
I don't know how you connect the two, Donna.
I can make a lot of connections
But by the way,
between his trade policies.
So you believe?
tariff.
Wait a second. You're telling me that the CEO of GM has decided to cut these jobs because of Donald Trump's trade policy? That's ridiculous.
No,
That's not why she decided to do it.
But
She decided to do it to
Donald
serve her
Trump
shareholders.
promised to save jobs and to bring more jobs, and he's not even delivering on that.
he's-
And
by
his
the way, he's
signature
brought a lot
on-
more
We're still the
jobs.
lowest unemployment rate that we've seen.
Donna, I mean,
Well,
it's just
that
not,
was
it's just
going
not
down
right.
under
Oh, shoot,
Obama.
please, no. All right, so anything that's good was started under Obama, and anything
That's
that's
true.
happened is Trump. And this is why people watch these
No,
shows.
I'm
Wait a
not
minute.
saying
This is
good
why
or bad.
people watch
No,
these
that's
shows and
not
going,
what I
what the hell are
said.
you talking about?
You're speaking for me without lipstick.
Unemployment is as low as it's ever been, and he's created a huge number of jobs.
But
So
but there are clearly dark clouds in the horizon.
Dark
We've
clouds?
Seen, you know, I mean,
which dark clouds, John? Are you just talking
I
about
think
the stock
the
market?
financial markets, they are reacting to the trade war with China. They are reacting some to the chaos, but it's also driven by a global economy that's slowing down, even though ours is still doing really well.
Right.
So let me ask you, Rich, because I'm old enough to remember when National Review was dead set against Donald Trump. Let's call it the cover you famously put out during the campaign against Trump, and you wrote, "Trump is philosophically a philosophically unmoored political opportunist who would trash the broad conservative ideological consensus within the GOP in favor of a free-floating populism with strong man overtones." Now, you've been more supportive since since he won the nomination and won the presidency. But are you now seeing your worst fears or signs your worst fears?
First of all, the
being realized?
context of that editorial is when we had 16 other guys
Right, I
to
understand,
choose
yeah.
from, present company included.
Thank you.
But I think if you look back, he's been better on domestic policy than I would have expected, and that's a big deal. But our concerns about his temperament and his shambolic style have largely proved out, and unfortunately this week has been a prime example of it.
And is he starting to lose those? I mean, his bulwark are those Republican senators
Right.
who have been so supportive by
Well,
and large. I mean, there have been
McConnell's-
the Corkers and the Flakes on the outside, but by and large, McConnell, the conservative Republicans.
McConnell's criticism this week of Mattis's resignation and how he couldn't agree with the president was a big warning sign for Trump about Republicans. I mean, McConnell is very disciplined. We all know that. Doesn't show his cards. The fact that that statement was so tough, and we know what McConnell thinks privately, which is Trump is a big problem for the party. But to have it said so publicly was significant. And look, and Trump is, fabulous reporting this morning by Peter Baker and Maggie Haberman. He's very isolated in the White House. He sees enemies everywhere. He's more distant from his children. He doesn't listen to Jared and Ivanka. He's watching a lot of television. He doesn't come down to the Oval Office until 11 a.m. most days. I mean, this is not
I'm
a
with
chief
Chris
executive.
on this. Like every other week, we've had this news cycle. That says the
Armageddon.
whole thing is falling apart, and my belief is just the wheels are never quite coming off the way they seem like they're coming off. This has been a bad week, but he'll get someone respectable to be defense secretary. These are plum jobs that people want.
And Mulvaney, how's he going to do?
Well, listen, I mean, that's going to be up to him. I was encouraged by hearing him say this morning he wasn't going to try to manage the president. And I do think that one of the mistakes, and I think a very well-intentioned mistake that General Kelly made was that he tried to manage the president. I don't think you can do that. And I think what you need to try to do is to say to the president, what are the areas that you want me to manage? And then manage those areas. And if he impedes you in those areas, then say, well, Mr. President, that wasn't our deal. And so I think Mick is right that he shouldn't try to manage the president, because I think that's just not a job that's going to happen.
Okay.
And I wonder, and I want to ask everybody who's out in the audience today, if they have a 72-year-old relative whose behavior
Who's
they're
like Donald
attempting
Trump?
to hold on, whose behavior they're attempting to change. When people get older, let's get ready, because that's happening to me now. When people get older, they become more and more convinced of the fact that what they're doing is the right thing, and it becomes harder to convince them otherwise.
Especially if they're president of the United States.
And I said, you add to it President of the United States and a lot of wealth and a lot of fame, it becomes even harder. Manage the things you can manage. And if Mick does that, I think he'll be successful. If he doesn't, it'll be hard.
Well, look, I'm looking forward to January 3rd. I'm coming back early because I cannot wait to see this remarkable, diverse Congress come to Washington, D.C. to hold this president accountable. But look, to your point, he wakes up every day, he watches television. If someone criticizes him, especially from his base, he just goes in the opposite direction.
All right, we are out of time. We'll be
Merry
back.
Christmas.
Much more to go. Merry Christmas to all of you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.